Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I'm here today with Jim Sayers, who is a pagan teacher, ritualist and community organizer dedicated to sacred herbalism, ancestral reverence and spiritual justice. He leads the House of Life, co-hosts the podcast Inside the Sacred Circle and Echoes of the Old Ways, and works for the Pagan Solidarity Group to build networks of mutual aid and resistance. And when he's not doing all of that, Jim is writing books and has 2 current works in progress at the moment, and both have connection with herbs. There's the Herbal Ally Way and also Temple Apothecary, exploring the intersection between ancient ritual and herbal plant wisdom. So without further ado, welcome, Jim. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk about the magic in you.
Well, thank you for having me, Francis. I really appreciate you taking time to do this.
You're more than welcome. So why don't we sort of start the discussions by, with me asking you, how do you describe your current path and what exactly do you do, especially in relation to the spiritual justice and why that is important in our day and age?
Well, my current path is still deeply rooted in plant medicine. I say that when I started on my path of devotion, I wandered into the garden and got lost. I'm I often have to claw my way back from animism to deity work. But my devotional practice has come full circle, and I work with Fellowship of Isis, and Isis has always been waiting in the wings, so to speak. But my path is still deeply rooted in plant medicine and working with the herbs, and they're inseparable.
Right, wonderful. And you said you started, like, you got into it by sort of wandering through the garden. So is this like something that you've always had an interest in since childhood, or is it something that maybe was a family tradition that everybody around you as you're growing up were interested in plants as well?
Sure, my grandmother was a gardener, and I was spent a lot of time with her because my parents had to work. So I spent a lot of time in the garden with her, and she really taught me about gardening and sparked that interest. And then when she went through cancer, and seeing the modern allopathic medicine really steered me toward finding alternatives. And that's when I started studying herbalism. I went to Dr. Christopher's School of Herbalism back when it was correspondence before computers, and learned clinical herbalism through them, which was very Western and allopathic. And through my own studies of Ayurveda and my own spirituality, I tried to meld the Eastern spiritualism back with the Western herbalist path, and started developing what I call the Herbal Ally Way, which is deepening that spiritual relationship with the plants and developing a friendship and a kinship with them as ancestors. And that has really colored my spirituality since then, from a young age.
Mhm. That's quite interesting. Are you able to sort of explain a little bit more what you mean by seeing the plants as ancestors? Because I know most of us are probably familiar with ancestors being sort of like our bloodline, our DNA of sort of human origin. But here you're talking
Mhm.
about them as being plants.
Yeah.
So,
It is a lot to take in. I do believe in evolution that is directed by a spiritual force, a spiritual entity. I never understood why, folks who are spiritual but don't accept evolution can't wrap their brain around spirit influencing evolution in the process of development. And I just see plants as one step along the way, but also assisting our ancestors, our human ancestors, by providing food, medicine, and then also the interesting science of the possibility that mushrooms assisted brain development, cannabinoid receptors within the body, they wouldn't be there if we didn't develop alongside these plants and the plants alongside us as helpers along the way.
Oh, no, thank you for explaining that a little bit deeper. It's really interesting. So you mentioned earlier too that you have this connection with the Fellowship of Isis. So how did you first get started? So we'll sort of explore a little bit about how you got interested in the herbs and how that sort of led into the study in there. But how did you get started with your paganism and your magical journey itself, and what sort of early influences did you have?
Sure. What was interesting is I was raised Pentecostal, which is a very spirit-oriented Christian faith. But I always found spirit more so in the garden and under the tree than when I ever did in a building, which I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to. And I remember at 14 checking out Buckland's Big Blue Book at the library. And it was funny because at the time the librarian questioned whether or not she should allow me to check out the book. But I insisted that I had an adult library card and I was checking it out. So that kind of started me on that path. And I blended the two together. I was still going to church on Sunday, but wandering off into the woods with Cunningham's books and sitting on the stone. And, they were able to be blended until I was about 19. And I realized that, I needed to find that path of closeness with Goddess and kind of peel away the onion and find, where I belonged.
Yep. And do you feel that you've found where you belong today?
I do. And, I think of the different paths that I've been on, and it's wonderful because I have so many mentors on so many different paths that I've journeyed. And I just love how, we come together with those that we respect and we love and we cherish their wisdom. And then there's times when, we separate and then we come back together again. And it's just a beautiful dance of walking each other home, so to speak. We learn what we're supposed to, and we take what we're supposed to, and we journey on, whether it's together or separate. And I'm grateful for all the paths that I've walked with so many mentors over the years.
So with all the labels that people seem to put on each other these days, especially within sort of the occult surroundings, we seem to have this fixation as to, if we're a witch, what sort of witch are we? If we're a magician, what sort of magician are we? Even if we're a pagan, what sort of pagan are we? How would you describe yourself? Do you have a label, or do you just go, no, I'm just anything?
I am an initiatory witch. I am a third degree Wiccan priest. But I think of myself more as a servant to the goddess, a servant to the earth, servant to the community. And I try to put myself in places where I can be most effective and of service to others. Sometimes I think the label witch, especially here in the United States, it does help folks to understand what I do. But on the other hand, sometimes it is alienating. So I like to let folks get to know me as a healer and as an herbalist and as that servant before we start talking about some of the other monikers for myself. But sometimes I think naming separates us too. When we put names on things, it causes division. But just being present and in service to others, I think definitely brings people together better.
Especially in our world today, where we're sort of like getting more and more sort of like siloed or into little boxes, and everybody's
Mm-hmm.
coming up with preconceived ideas. And if you sort of, and I know this from my own personal experience, if you sort of have many threads and you do many things, some people just can't understand how they can all interrelate. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
you go beyond the labels as
Most
well.
definitely.
But you did mention one important thing, which I guess today people don't usually associate witchcraft with, especially like through initiatory witchcraft and the higher degrees, because everybody sort of focused a little bit more on sort of operative magic, so to speak. But that is one of service of the gods, or even in your case in particular, to the wider community, especially with what has been happening in America. And this is something that we were just talking a little bit off camera, that it's not an isolated thing just in America. It's
Mm-hmm.
happening all around the world today. And that is sort of looking out for basically our rights as sort of non-Christian or a minority religion or a belief system. So what are some areas there that you do your work in, and why is it still important in the 21st century?
Sure. Well, Pagan Solidarity Group had started Oberon, Zell, and Starhawk kind of sent the message out to the community, and it was in response to the Archbishop who was kind of placed in a position by our president of having to defend standing up for what many folks believed were, Christian ideals. And it started as a signatory to sign on in support of her. Um, and it kind of developed into an organization of different leaders to come together to put out some statements. But as time has gone on, we've looked at being more inward facing and providing resources. There's so many great leaders in the community who have done interfaith work and organizing and developed 501c3s. But there's also so many other temples and covens and hearths and what have you that are just getting organized. And how can we provide resources to those folks to get to a level where they can protect themselves from the changing climate in terms of politics and spirituality here in the United States and around the world.
Mm, mm, no. And it's always good to, especially if it's something that you haven't actually thought about and
Mm-hmm.
it's a territory that you're not familiar with, as to where do you go and what do you actually need. I think a number of years ago, I'll say even 20 years ago, I know here in South Australia, I was a member of Pagan Alliance South Australia, and we had a few legislation changes, one in particular around knife laws, and it was under the changes or modifications to the Offensive Weapons Act. And not every pagan's running around with a dagger or a thame or a sword, but it was on the occasions that if you wanted to hold an outdoor ritual, or if you're going to and from, that depending on the situation, you could actually either lose your weapon or
Wow.
end up in jail or be fined. So it is something, again, that majority of us don't think about it, but there's always that odd occasion
Mm-hmm.
that you might need it. And also raising the awareness to police that this is why we may carry an offensive weapon, a knife or a sword, and for them to be a little bit more educated amongst their own members as well.
Oh, that's
So it is.
interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think of that, but sure, you're taking an athame to the park.
Yeah, well, in our modern city living these days, a lot of people don't have backyards or a room big enough to hold a circle. And if you wanted to sort of do a group event, that could be, it's always sort of thinking about worst case scenarios. But yeah, and it does come up every now and then. I think even recently in South Australia, it's come up again with the revisions of knives due to knife attacks and things like that. So it's just being a little bit more vigilant as to, and I know a lot of pagans don't, well, Yeah, a lot of pagans don't necessarily think themselves as religious, but it's an umbrella that sometimes you need to put yourself under to get that,
for protection.
yes, that
Most
protection.
definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we move away from this sort of like grim
Right.
politics and come back to something wonderful, and that's your books, because not only do you have one book, you have two books coming out.
Mhm.
And the first one, the Herbal Ally Way, can you tell me a little bit more about it? What sort of
Mhm.
was the inspiration to it? And yes, anything else that we
Sure.
should know
So
about it?
the Herbal Ally Way is what I call the process and the um, path to developing those relationships with herbs, and it is a conglomeration of classes that I've taught for almost 20 years in person, locally, as well as online. And I am compiling it into a book that you could start at page one with no experience and finish up the book with enough depth and surety of oneself that you can find an herb in one's yard, learn about it, and develop that close relationship. And that is very much a work in progress that is going to take some time, because I'm actually teaching local folks chapter by chapter as we go along as I write it. So I'm trying to reteach some of these classes and work, as many people have written, work the bugs out, you know, and also get other input from others to make it easier for folks to walk that path. So it's going to take some time to reteach all of these classes and kind of reintegrate others' wisdom into that. And the other book, I've actually signed with Moon Books to write Temple Apothecary, which is kind of blending two of my loves, well, multiple loves, archaeology, my devotion to Osset or Isis, and the Negeru, with plant medicine as well, and really researching those herbs of the Nile that would have, been used. And this book is more of a remembering, rather than just a book that puts herbs out there. It's prompting folks to remember the paths that they've walked, in the past, and bring that wisdom forward.
Well, that sounds really fascinating. And if we just move back to your first book, I take it this will be something where you'll be looking at probably more common herbs as opposed to exotic herbs, because a lot of the herbal
Mhm.
books do include a lot of the exotic herbs, yet people seem to forget about
Mhm.
the common herbs in their garden, like rosemary and lavender, and just how
Mhm.
fantastic those herbs are. You don't need exotic plants all the time
Well,
either.
most definitely, and that is where the herbal wisdom from our ancestors comes into play, because our ancestors couldn't jump on the internet and order ashwagandha or even go to kola or some of the Asian herbs. They had what was in their backyard, and I'm here in northeastern Ohio. I'm on what was the land of the Osage, um, and of course, the colonists also brought herbs from Europe here. But when you walk out in the yard or in wild places, and you find stinging nettle, or you find colt's foot and plantain and all of these wonderful herbs that are in our backyard, and developing those relationships, because they're readily obtainable. You don't have to spend money to get them, and they still offer the same healing potential as those exotic herbs. Um, Marketing does a really good job of sensationalizing, the newest superfood or the greatest herb, and they usually will take something that's been used for thousands of years for, say, respiratory or something like that, and then they somehow find a way to market it for weight loss, and then it becomes like this huge big thing. So it is so important to just go into one's own space where you live and sit and make space for the herbs that are there, because those are the ones that are calling out to you. And they're the ones that, because they share that space, that have that connection with our spirit, but also our body.
Yeah, yes. And I know where I live, and I'm here on the Ghana country. And even with all the other peoples here in Australia, they all had specific herbs or specific plants in their area as well. And as you said, so stop sort of listening more to the marketing gurus out there and turn a little bit more locally. And that way you are also not pushing other plants to the brink of sort of extinction. Mass production as well.
Most definitely. Yeah, that has become a big problem. Here in the United States, and this is food related, but it's still a plant and it is medicinal. But there was this big push for folks to eat quinoa, and it turned out that the areas where it grows, because it was a subsistence food, those people are going without food, so that they could supply the North American market for quinoa and the global market. And it's just, looking at responsibility. I can eat rice, I can eat corn. I don't need to take somebody's food out of their mouth in order to be healthy.
Well, true, yes. And we don't often think about the food chain. And while you're just mentioning that, I'm thinking of krill. I was very fortunate last year to go to Antarctica with my father, and on one of those, it was an exploration boat, and we had scientists on there. And one of the things that we learned was the food chain, and everything in those southern oceans feed on something that starts off with krill. Yet we're harvesting krill for I don't even know what they're using krill for, a superfood. Yeah, as you said, a superfood. And it's just like, we don't need it. Yet we're taking out that very source at that bottom level, where why bother saving the whales if we're just taking out their food source? So
Removing that foundation. Yeah, that's scary.
It's coming back to taking a bit more responsibility and being a little bit more aware of our environment and how we interact with everything.
Most definitely.
So congratulations on the 2 books. So they'll be out next year, late this year. Do you have any dates for when they can be out? Or
next year, even we'll probably see Temple Apothecary first. I am working through that. Yourself as an author, I see your many many books behind you. Takes a little time to iron it out, and when we get there, of course, I'll have a better idea as to dates. But I'm thinking probably mid to late part of next year.
Yeah, and that's something else. It's like it does take a while to write a book, to then when you sort of like send off to a publisher and then go through all the edits, and it's actually more of a process than what people do realize. But that is wonderful. And your podcast, we've actually got a number of podcasts. So you've got The Sacred Circle, one, and then you also have Echoes of the Ancient Ways. So what are these 2 podcasts about?
I am co-host with my dear friend Joanne Gajewski, and we started Inside the Sacred Circle as a neutral platform to sit down and, like yourself, talk to folks in the community who may not have that voice or that platform to really get their message out, but more importantly, talk about the work that they're doing on the local level, because that's where change takes place. And we've been blessed to talk to so many great community workers, but also different spiritualities that maybe folks aren't exposed to or really know about. So really bringing that knowledge out to the community in a casual platform. It is a podcast in the sense that it has that same format, but we stream live on Facebook, and of course those are archived on YouTube. So it's nice to have it out there, and the audience can join in and comment and ask questions. And then Echoes of the Old Ways is I'm a co-host on that also with my dear friends and mentors, Gwendolyn Holdenberry and Davron Michaels. And that is an attempt to sit down with elders of the community who have wisdom to share, and to archive and also talk about that work that they're doing on the local level and in their community as well. But really trying to capture that and be that bridge between the younger TikTok generation and the older generation who may not be speaking to each other, and try to bring them together. I always liken conversations like the one that we're having with sitting around the kitchen table. We both have our cup of tea, and we're just having a casual conversation. And I and I think that those are the greatest opportunities for wisdom shares. So that's kind of where those two podcasts came from, was that desire to share wisdom.
Especially in this day and age. I mean, I was talking about some of the negative things. This is one of the positive things with Zoom and with all these sort of like teleconferencing, is that we can do this. Mm-hmm. We can speak to people all around the world and be more sort of open and exposed to what other people are doing, their thoughts, and especially, as you said, the generational gap, or how things have changed, especially so quickly in the last few years. Between, you mentioned your first introduction was, the big blue book of Buckland, and I think for a lot of us of a certain era, yes, it was.
Yeah.
These days, everybody's it's TikTok or it's Reddit or something like that. So it's interesting that I suppose it sort of like sets us out as to what our initial reference was.
It's interesting. I wouldn't change anything about the way that I learned as I was growing up, but I can't imagine that ability to have knowledge at your fingertips. I remember when my parents ordered me an encyclopedia set, and they would send one a month. And I was like, come on, I want to get to the next next letter in the alphabet so I could read this encyclopedia. And, just to be able to, use a search engine to pull things up, just the wealth of information and wisdom that are at the younger generation's fingertips is just amazing. I mean, we both grew up, I'm sure, with the Harvest Gold or Avocado Green rotary phone, and that's how you communicated. And now, this is like the Jetsons, where we're able to talk to each other face to face.
Yes, very much so. And another thing I have on my list about you, Jim, is something to do with mushrooms.
Oh, yeah.
A mushroom festival that you are involved in. That sounds a little bit sort of out there, or a little bit sort of like, what are you talking about? What do you mean it's mushroom festival?
Sure. Everyone automatically thinks, because you think mushroom festival, and then you see somebody who is practicing what might be considered an alternative spirituality. But my cousin Vent Wesley, he actually organized the Ohio Mushroom Festival, and it is just a great group of people who are fascinated by all mushrooms, and the potential that they have for medicine, but also culinary use. That is a big focus of the festival, is the culinary mushrooms. They host a huge mushroom dinner for everybody during that, but it's foraging, and it's going into the woods and learning about the mushrooms that our ancestors utilized. And it really ties back to my own spirituality in the sense of many folks may have heard of, like the Gaia hypothesis, or the Gaia theory, and that the Earth is a living, breathing organism, and those mushrooms in the mycelium are that communication network, and the way that they work with the trees, and it just works so well with my spiritual path and my herbal path, that I became fascinated with mushrooms when my cousin started organizing this. So I really just help him with marketing and promo and that sort of thing, trying to get the message out there. But it's a great science if folks are interested in diving into it, because it's not just science, it's spirituality also. Those mushrooms are here for a reason. And I had talked about walking that path with our plant allies. The mushrooms are definitely one of those allies that have stood with humanity from the first time we crawled out of the ocean.
Yes, and as you said, because the mycelium, it's the networks, the communications, and it's almost like you can sort of take the mushroom as a metaphor or an archetype, and then we can look at it as to how we can sort of bring that communication, that networking back into our everyday lives as well.
Most definitely.
Especially in this day and age where people may be feeling, to say, we've got a lot of information at our fingertips, but we can also feel very isolated as everybody's online, and we're sort of like missing this human contact.
Face to face, most definitely.
Yes, yes. So while we're sort of wrapping up our time together, I'm just going to ask you, is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew right when you commenced your journey?
Oh my goodness, I would say don't take yourself so seriously. Especially, in my path within Wicca and as an initiatory witch, we're prescribed, lessons and things to learn. And because of my OCD and, things having to be a certain way, sometimes the traditions of a path, while they're important to preserve wisdom and to help to point us on our way, they are a door opener to possibility. You don't have to dissolve yourself and put yourself into that mold and remain there. It's important to learn from our traditions and our mentors, and to walk that path to gain the wisdom. But it is that door opener that opens you up to a world of possibility on your own personal path. So not taking yourself so seriously and laughing along the way. I think there was a lot of times that I could have enjoyed myself better and been more in the moment, and laughed rather than, looking back. And, I missed a lot of moments and deep connections because of taking myself so seriously.
And what about, do you feel your path has sort of supported you when you've even gone through sort of like more challenging or darker times? Has it supported you in those areas as well?
Oh, goodness, yes. I can't imagine going through life without that support system. Even when goddess or, God seems distant, they're still there. And I have found some of my most profound growth when they have seemed distant, because that longing and that calling them back and realizing that it was myself who was distant. They were always there and waiting, but it was myself who had withdrawn. But in our mind, because we try to protect our ego, we even think that divinity, the divine has withdrawn in order to protect our ego and explain away our situation and not blame ourselves. But that ever-knowing presence, that they're always there and waiting for us to come back into a daily devotion again. Definitely,
guess,
definitely a support system.
and I guess you could also say the same things about the plant allies as well. It's up to us.
Yes.
They're always there, but it's up to us to sort of like open our own selves up and
Most definitely.
communicate more with them. So when your books come out, we'll be able to read all about how we can go back and do that again.
Yes. And Francis, I'm excited because we're going to have you on Inside the Sacred Circle too pretty soon. So I'm
Well,
excited.
I'm going to have to think about something intelligent to say then. So
Oh, it's,
I'm
it's a
looking
very,
forward to it, Jim. So
I
I'm
can't
going to.
wait.
Oh, thank you. So for people who are watching this, if they want to get in touch with you or find out more about you,
Mhm. Mhm.
where can they go and what can they do? How can they reach out to you?
You can, of course, Facebook is my primary spot. You can find me on Facebook, follow me on Facebook as Jim Sayers, or my new Facebook page, Jim Sayers Author. Um, just because it's hard to Facebook only allows you to have so many connections. But also, I have many groups, the House of Life, the Herbal Ally Way, and you can find me on there, but also on YouTube. We have Inside the Sacred Circle, and my own YouTube page under Jim Sayers as well. So many ways to find me. If you're determined, you'll find me. I'm there.
And I'll put some of those links below for people to reach out to you
Appreciate
as
it.
well. So Jim, thank you very much for taking this time to talk about the magic in you.
Oh, thank you. I loved our time around the kitchen table.
And again, looking forward for your books to sort of be available when they become available, because it sounds like there's some really important reminders, especially in that as we get more and more into this technological age, to get out into nature, to connect with our plant ancestors, and as in the temple book, how we sort of reconnect, remembering how we once did connect with them as well.
Very good.
So I say blessings
Thank you.
and thank
Thank you.
you.